Good afternoon, Council. We're gathering here for a special meeting to have a workshop on our strategic plan for our go forward. So we're going to start with the land acknowledgement, and Councillor Potts will assist us with that.
Thanks, Mayor Hamlin. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
There's now a motion to adopt the agenda. The recommendation is that the content of the special council agenda for May 9, 2024 be adopted as amended. There's one, and the amendment is as follows. Item 4.3, strategic plan workshop discussion attachment, which is added. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Ring. Any comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And I'll just mention that Councillor Doherty is going to be joining us remotely, but she's having some technical difficulties. So she hasn't joined yet, but she will as soon as that's sorted. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? If you find yourself in that position, please declare at that time. So now we're over to the important part, our strategic planning workshop. Now, the workshop today is going to be facilitated by Strategic Plan Consultant Strategy Corps, and Tracy and Luke in particular here. So at this point, I'm turning the meeting over to you guys. Thank you.
Is this working now? Great. Super. Thank you. And Luke is just going to pop his screen up here. And I think we'd like to open by thanking Town Council and staff for hosting us here today. We're at a really exciting point in the strategic planning process where, you know, we've spent several months, and we'll get into this in a moment, engaging with your community members, community groups and partner agencies, and so many more, stakeholders over the last couple of months, that it's exciting to be at the point now where we get to consider and reflect on all that feedback as we map out, the blueprint for the next 4 years. And so thank you for your time and your commitment to this process, because ultimately it is your strategic plan. What we're here to do is facilitate a process, but your role is to create the content that goes into the strategic plan. And that's really what we're here to do today. So if we can just pop down to our agenda, we're going to start with a bit of an overview in terms of where we're at. And I also want to, introduce some food for thought as we get into the meat of starting to map out the strategic plan and some of the key priorities within it. Then we'll move into a review of our SWOT analysis. I know some members of council have had an opportunity to review an earlier draft of this, as they are members of the Strategic Planning Steering Committee. But this is an opportunity to reconsider everything that we've heard and think about, are there elements of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we may have missed? Are there gaps? Are there things that we want to ensure are reflected in this critical analytical framework that then informs the strategic plan? And then the next session will really focus on, okay, if this is where are we headed? And we'll start to think about some of those broad strategic priorities. And then what I'd like to do at the end, and this is a very ambitious agenda, as you can see, is to go back up to the very top, highest level element of the strategic plan, which is the vision. And think about that. Think about what still resonates from the vision that you have from the 2020 to 2023 strategic plan, but also understand in what ways may the vision needs to change to reflect the Collingwood that you have today, but also the Collingwood that you want to see in the future. That's our agenda. As the mayor mentioned, we are looking to have somewhat of a informal discussion, although I know it is difficult in a, impressive council chamber such as this, but we are open to taking your questions and your comments at any time. I will, in the interests of, keeping to our agenda and making sure that we finish on time, I may try to move us forward, but please, anybody who may be in the room or watching online or behind me here, we are open to having any feedback shared with us at any time. Our contact information is available on the town webpage for this project. So, we're accessible at any moment. So if we can move down to the next slide. This is, kind of where we're at in the strategic planning process. We kicked off last fall and spent really the fall, winter, and early spring hearing from folks as to what their concerns are, what their ambitions are, and what their priorities are for the future of Collingwood. I'll get into some of what that looked like in a moment. Then, as many of you are aware, and I know there was a council meeting on Monday, where you reviewed the findings of the market research survey led by Forum. So that was the last piece of consultation, let's say, that is fed into everything we're talking about today. That said, we are still in the thick of it. This strategic planning process, we are still iterating and creating it. And so there is always an opportunity to provide more input and feedback. Nothing that we're going to be talking about today is set in stone yet. We are very much at the creation stage. As you all know, part of this project also includes the creation of a downtown visioning master plan. And I'm pleased to say that that work with our partners, Foten Planning and Design, has started. Last month, they kicked off with a workshop with the BIA, spent some time reviewing key documentation, as well as a couple of other meetings with key stakeholder groups. And that work, including community engagement as part of that process, will be forthcoming over the next couple of months. If we can just move to the next slide. In terms of some of the engagement activities that we've undertaken, we've had the opportunity to speak with pretty much everybody in this room, council, department heads, members of the steering committee, which includes community representatives as well. We've also, engaged community members through a mix of both in-person pop-up events where we had the opportunity to come up to the town in the winter and attend events like the Christmas market, visit the arena, and we were able to have informal conversations with community members about what they see for the future of Collingwood and what that looks like to them. We also engaged all of the town's task forces, boards, and committees, and that was a special opportunity to gather feedback on issues of importance to the community and to the town. Often advisory committees are created to focus on particular issues or priorities. And so that gave us a window into some more targeted or more specific comments on certain issues ranging, from housing to accessibility to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think as part of this, I would just like to say we thank everyone for their active engagement over the past couple of months. I know that many members of council, many community members attended several sessions with us, and their feedback has been included continuously as we've been thinking with all of you, what does the future look like and how do we get there? The last piece, as I mentioned, was the survey, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that as I do understand there was a presentation on Monday. So just by way of some introductory comments on strategic planning, I'm very passionate about strategic planning. Some of you may have heard me talk about this in the past, so I apologize if it's a bit Groundhog Day-esque, but the thing about strategic planning is that it can sometimes feel a bit airy-fairy or far removed from what you do every day in the way that you respond to residents every day. So why do we do it? Well, we do it for a whole bunch of reasons. The first is that it helps build consensus on council about what the path forward is. You make decisions collectively around the horseshoe. This isn't cabinet. Decisions are not made behind closed doors. And so part of this, what the strategic plan does is help you have conversations with each other about what you want to do collectively as the elected leaders of this town. It's a really important document in that sense. It also helps you tell staff what you want to do, what you want them to do. It gives them some direction about how to prioritize. And the last bit is that it also communicates to the community, the people that you represent, where you're headed, what you're doing, and why. And so it's an important document in that it brings together council, staff, and the community to shape the future. And I'll give you a quick anecdote, but everybody knows about, the landing on the moon. And I have a little story to tell about that, but it ties in here. It's not mine. I took it from somebody else, but nevertheless, on May 25th, 1961, President Kennedy addressed Congress and proposed that the U.S., and I quote here, should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. End quote. It's actually a great key performance indicator if you think about it. A specific goal, a target date in mind of when they're going to do it before the decade is out. But that aside, about 5 or 6 years later, so 1967 or so, a couple of scientists were working late at night at NASA trying to figure out how they were going to do this. They took a break. Maybe it was a beautiful day like it is today here in Collingwood, went outside. And while they were outside, they saw a janitor throwing out the garbage from the day. And they said, "Why are you still here? What are you doing?" And he responded, "Well, we're trying to get a man on the moon, of course. So I'm here doing my part." And I think what's so special about that is the way that everyone is involved in turning the strategic plan, turning a big goal from something on paper that sounds nice into a reality. It's not something that members of council, that town staff, or the community are going to be able to do on their own. It's something they do collectively, and everyone has a role to play. And, I think that's what's so important. And even if you go on a tour today, and I don't know how many of you have done this, but if you go on a tour to NASA, you can see the pride with which, everyone who works there takes pride in the work that they've done, in what they contributed to then, what they continue to contribute to today. And I think this is all the more important, and I share this anecdote because it's challenging for municipalities right now. It's challenging to be an elected official. It's challenging to be able to respond to the volume and the intensity of needs and expectations that you're seeing in the community. It's challenging when the resources are continually forcing you to make decisions about doing more with less or the same. And so, all councils, not just in Collingwood, are needing to make difficult decisions about where and how to invest. It's about making choices. And municipalities have something like anywhere from, 50 to 100 lines of business. I think your CAO can correct me, but maybe Collingwood's is 80 or so. So how do you decide where to focus? Municipalities aren't like Kentucky Fried Chicken, where your business model is to create mediocre chicken, right? So every year, maybe that's always going to be your goal, is to sell more chicken. Here, it's much more complicated, and that makes the strategic planning process so much more complicated. Because if everything's a priority, then nothing's really a priority. And I'm sure some of you in our conversations will recall me saying that. And so, a strategic plan is that document through which council can think about how to make some of those choices about what to do, about where to invest, about where to allocate scarce resources. And the classic definition of politics is the allocation of scarce resources. But this document won't be helpful if it's a wish list, like a blue sky wish list that's unanchored from any of the realities of your community in terms of what it can afford to pay to do certain things, or in terms of your staff, the resources that they have to do certain things. So it can't be all things to all people. It is a focused document that can help you make decisions and can also communicate to staff how to prioritize. And as you can see on our slide here, it's really important that the strategic plan feed into or click into the other elements of the town's corporate plans. Like it's a bit like Lego. There needs to be good synergy for these things between these different plans for a strategic plan to actually get implemented versus live on your website as a very attractive looking document, because there'll be a beautiful picture of Collingwood on the front. And so, this is something we want to think about, is how this strategic plan, which is that highest level vision, right? We're talking 30,000 foot level priorities, feeds into master planning, parks master plan or transportation master plan that guide long-term investments and planning for the town, how it'll be realized through the annual operational plan, which will set out what the town's going to do on an every year type of basis, but also how you're going to, realize the strategic plan through the budget. And this is critical because you could say that the budget is really where you make the decisions. And so one thing, I encourage you to think about is the way in which the budget can serve as a bit of an accelerator pedal. Through the budget, you can say, we want to do more of this. We want to do it faster. You're going to allocate more resources, but you can also take your foot off the gas and you can say, we're actually going to pause or pull back from this and maybe reprioritize and go harder or faster over here. But it's the way that these various layers of how the town works fit together that will support you in achieving that overall strategic vision. And so, the reason that we start here is because we want to make sure that ultimately this strategic plan means something and that it goes somewhere. That in 4 years' time, if you're going through another strategic planning process, you can reflect on what you've achieved. And I think that's really important because there are far too many strategic plans that stay at that airy-fairy level. And, you're back here in 4 years and it looks pretty much the exact same. So if we can move to the next slide. And part of our process, and as you all know, and why we have, staff here as well, is that, our strategic planning process really mimics the roles and responsibilities of council as set out in the Municipal Act. Both have a role to play, for example, in setting the priorities. Council is a critical conduit through which it represents community members, but staff also have a role to play because they'll tell you what you need to do so you don't go to jail. They'll tell you what you need to do so that you can maintain the roads, the integrity of the roads, for example, based on their expertise. And then, we could actually add a third bar here, which is the community. The community will also tell you what they need, what they want to see. And you're here as kind of, part of that representation of community input, as well as everything that we've heard directly from your community members. And this is where we are today in this first stage. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question in terms of this, maybe just expanding on develop, because I think council and staff developed this, and I think anybody in the community who thought staff were developing this plan on our behalf and that we were simply approving or rubber stamping would question our involvement. So it was something that immediately jumped out to me on the graph. I think that should be a double dot.
Yep. And that's a great point because that's where we're headed, because it's not so much that staff are developing the content of the strategic plan in terms of setting the priorities. That is really the responsibility of council. Council sets the strategic direction, staff implement. But what we're going to do in the next phase, once council has said through this process today, this is what we think are our goals and priorities. This is what we want to achieve. We're going to work with staff to say, okay, if this is what council said they want to see, how do we cook it up? How do we make it real? What are some of the projects that we can undertake to deliver on these priorities? And that's in part because there are probably very many things within that you are already doing that would help address some of these priorities that need to carry forward. But, and you're right, and maybe we do need to move a dot there, but you can see the way in which underdeveloped the box stretches over into council, because we're going to bring that back to you. right? We are only at the starting point. So you're actually going to have an opportunity to review the strategic initiatives or kind of those key activities that are the how we're going to do it to determine whether or not you think those are the right things that should be undertaken. So staff, in that sense, we might take the first cut with them, but you're absolutely right. You know, the community expects to see your handprints on the strategic plan on all elements, and ultimately you endorse it at the end. So you need to feel comfortable with everything that's inside of it. So I hope that kind of answers your question a bit there.
Thank you.
Great. And then once we've kind of gone through, and we'll be back for another workshop. So hopefully you're excited about that. We'll see how this one goes. Maybe ask that question in 3 hours time. And then we'll be back and you'll approve it. And then staff will go away over the next 4 years, and through their operational plan, we'll start implementing and acting on some of those strategic initiatives, coming back to you ideally through an annual or other type of reporting cycle so that you can monitor how things are going. Are we making progress? And you can see that monitoring and reviewing progress is both a responsibility of staff and council. And that's why we would recommend, you know, that there be an annual report and that there be performance measures as part of this. That is how you make sure that you've got a strategic plan that's actually being implemented versus something that is too vague to really be able to see anything come out the other end of it. So if we can just move to the next slide. So this is just, I want to have a brief discussion on the scope of a strategic plan. And for those of you who are at the steering committee meeting, well, you've heard me say this already, but as a history PhD, I can't resist talking about kind of the history of strategic planning. But the most important point is that strategic plans, even 5 or 10 years ago, let's say, really tended to be corporately focused. That meant that it focused on those activities within the 4 walls of the municipality in terms of what it directly delivers, program or service, what it invests in through the budget, or regulates through bylaw. If it wasn't something that was within a municipality's scope of, jurisdiction, you could say, sorry, pal, we're not actually allowed to get into that business or to do anything in this area. And you'll recall from a few years ago when Sabine Matheson was here and did some, orientation training at the onset of the new term, the Municipal Act is actually not so cut and dry. And if you look at Section 11.2, there's a lot through the broad powers that are assigned to municipalities, a lot of activity that you could undertake. It references, that municipalities have broad power in things like health and well-being. Climate change was added in 2017. But what it does not provide are the tools or resources for you to be able to really bite that off and do something with it. And yet, when the community has concerns about access to physicians, for example, about homelessness, about the survival and the vibrancy of the downtown or local businesses, who do they come to? I'm sure they come to all of you in this room. They expect their local representatives to hear them, to respond to them, and to take action. And so we've seen this swing from the corporate strategic plan to what you have, which is a community-based strategic plan, where you include items and priorities, even in those areas that are not within your span of control in terms of direct service delivery, investment through the budget, or regulation through bylaw. And it's in part because you're accepting responsibility to care for the community that you represent. That doesn't mean it's easier. In fact, it makes things much more difficult. And if we can just move to the next slide. One of the things we'll talk a lot about here is the importance of language and verbs. Because a critical function of what a municipality does is not just those things that it can control, but also all of the other activities that it undertakes when it collaborates with community organizations, for example, to deliver events, when it works with the BIA to create a downtown visioning master plan, for example, when it advocates for community needs around a new hospital or transit or a wastewater treatment plant, for example, with other levels of government or, neighboring municipalities or the county. And so I encourage us all as we go throughout the next, 2.5 hours or so to think about, do we have the right directionality in terms of what we as a town want to do here, what we think our scope of activity is? Because in some cases, it may be you want to implement a plan, or you want to encourage something to happen, or you want to advocate for a specific issue. Those verbs each have different meanings and they give different direction to your staff. They also give different direction as to how you would assess whether or not you made progress on something. Because if you put the verb implement, well, in 4 years, you better be able to show that you did it. And so I encourage you to think carefully about language. And really, one of the last points I'll say is this plan, I believe, has a 4-year horizon, 2024 to 2028. Much of what you'll see in the draft before us, in the draft that we're going to iterate with everybody in the room and the community over the next little while, is that there are going to be a lot of goals and priorities in there that will require activity, sustained action well after 2028. The housing crisis didn't come about in a 4-year period. It was a long process. And so, making significant changes to reverse the housing crisis or to, change things in the community or to even build new infrastructure projects, a lot of those are going to cut across this term of council, the next term of council, this strategic plan, the next strategic plan. And so what you're doing as you map out the priorities in this strategic plan is you're not just thinking about the next 4 years. You're actually thinking much longer, 10 or 20 years down the line. And your last strategic plan had some of those elements as well. The other thing is that there are some, and this is the nature of strategic planning and why it's not like KFC, because there are a lot of things in here that you'll never have a tick box for. Are you ever going to be done supporting community safety and well-being? Probably not. Are you ever going to be finished supporting local businesses, encouraging investment attraction, trying to be innovative, drive entrepreneurialism in your town? No. So it's more about how do our priorities evolve over time. We don't need to start from scratch all the time, because a lot of what we're doing here is to try to figure out how we could do it better or differently to meet the needs, to meet the aspirations of our community. Next slide, please, Luke. Last point. Today, we are focused very much on, I'm sure you've all seen the SMART goal framework today, or in the past, goals should be specific, measurable, it's hard doing this out of order, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Our focus in this workshop is just on those first two, relevant and specific. And in a lot of ways, it's harder to stay at the strategic level around what are our priorities, what do we want to do, what do we care about? What does our community care about? Than it is to start getting into the weeds on specific projects or how. I think a lot of folks, we want to move swiftly to action. We've heard that. We want to make change in our community. But it does warrant a pause and thinking about, but what do we really want? Mindful again that if everything's a priority, how do we make anything stand out? How do we deliver progress on any one thing? Again, thinking about our limited capacity and our limited resources. So here today, we're really focused on setting out those broad priorities. And it is challenging. And I'm sure there's going to be many times when you're thinking, Stacey, how can we comment on this if we don't know what we would do to achieve it? Very fair question. That's what our second workshop is going to be about when you see everything together. But what we want to talk about here are those big questions. What is our vision for the future? What are our priorities over the next 4 years? And that's not to say that, operational items, that they don't matter. They absolutely do matter. It's just that Collingwood is a mature, sophisticated municipal administration. I say that confidently, having led similar processes in, about 50 municipalities over the years. You have a corporate planning framework, Luke, and if you can just go back up to 6. You've got a corporate planning framework that ensures that the great services that are provided to your residents, thinking about recreation programs, for example, or the maintenance of parks, that those will continue. They just live in a different layer of your corporate planning framework. What we're talking about are those big transformative items. They're, the big issues, the big priorities. That's what we're here to focus on today. It's the hardest part of the process, but we're here to walk you through it, and we look forward to really hearing from you as part of this. So with that in mind, any questions or comments on those couple of introductory remarks? All right. So let's start going through the SWOT. And the SWOT is, it's a document that really summarizes everything we've heard over the last several months. I caution you, it's not a list of every single point that was raised to us. That document would be far too long. What this is it aggregates what we heard into key themes, and it aggregates everything we heard all together from council, from staff, from community members. It includes, elements of the survey because we had access to that and we're able to use that as well. So it's not an exhaustive list, but it is, I think, a synthesis of where we think those strengths are, what the town can capitalize on or leverage in the future, where those areas of improvement are that often turn into opportunities in your strategic plan, what some of those macro level threats might be that in some cases are outside of your control, but you'll need to be responsive to. And then, of course, what are those opportunities that really start to give us a sense of what the priorities might be in the strategic plan? We are pretty good listeners, but we don't presume to get it right all the time. So if there are things here that you think that we've missed that you'd like to see included in the SWOT, do let us know. We'll start with strengths, and we've broken our analysis into two, one of which is the community of Collingwood, the people, right? And then one is the municipal administration, so the corporation. But let's start with the community. And I'm not going to read them all out, but I think at the 1,000-foot level, we heard that people love living here, that there's an incredible amount of civic pride. You've got an engaged community. People want to support the municipality in executing on its vision. You've got a great location. We've got a growing community, parks and, the green space, the quality of life here is very high. You're downtown. I mean, Luke and I, the second we rolled in, we're talking about the beauty of the downtown. So anything here that you don't see? And then if we can move to the next one, you've got vibrant local businesses. People really like that there's a mix of, everyone feels like they can get what they need in the town. Active lifestyle. You've got the hospital, although we also understand that that's a concern for residents as well. Vibrant arts and culture sector. You've got, you've got a Georgian College currently, but also opportunity to maybe expand the post-secondary sector here. Anything you feel like we missed? When you think about what's working really well?
Well, I was just reading this. So the natural environment, you're talking about all the everything, but I don't see the waterfront, which is really our coast. And also we have a lot of tributaries, rivers that come in with some green spaces. I mean, would that not be one of our biggest?
Yeah, I think we certainly probably meant to include that, but you're right. Maybe it doesn't appear on the page.
Oh, sorry, just to interrupt. We do have this as a special council meeting, and as just noted with the mayor, that additional public feedback is, you're hoping anybody watching today will participate outside this and provide it directly to you?
Yes.
Okay. So today's session is about gathering council's kind of input to kind of start the base to get public feedback? Okay.
But thank you. Good catch. Other comments? Council, anything?
I would reiterate that point. Excuse me, just for the record, I would reiterate that point because in the feedback we got from the survey, certainly access to the waterfront was a big part of it. So confirming that point as a council member. Thank you.
Thank you. And certainly it was, you had an entire strategic pillar in your last strategic plan devoted to the waterfront. Anything else? Well, I'm going to hope that means that we are good listeners and that we covered it off pretty well. We've had a lot of time, right, to engage the community. So we've heard from a lot of folks. So our next one is really about the corporation or the administration. And that's thinking about, council, thinking about staff, thinking about how services are delivered. We've heard that you've got a strong staff team, some expertise, and people who really are committed to serving in the best interests of the community. We know from the survey findings that there's, I think, impressive satisfaction overall with the town's government. And certainly you'll be able to use that to benchmark against yourself in the future, which I think was a really important point that came out of Wynn's from Forum Research. Her presentation on Monday is a lot of that material you'll be able to monitor over time. Are we getting better? Are we falling off? We heard that council and staff work well together. This is always a work in progress because it evolves over time. But we heard that there is a strong relationship, respectful, collaborative, and through that, you're able to get things done. We've heard about the important, that staff have really improved corporate planning, performance measurement, things like that, you're continuing to mature how you operate, especially on the administrative side, to be a progressive, modern local government. And then we've also heard that the town has been very proactive in planning for the future. So you have a number of, master plans. The strategic plan is coming, the downtown visioning master plan, but you've got the affordable housing master plan, which was just approved when we had started this project. You've got a climate change action plan, an arts center feasibility study. You've got a lot of plans. The question, of course, will be is moving from plan to implementation. It's always much more challenging. But anything you think we missed here in terms of how the administration works? Yes, go ahead.
Actually, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but I know Councillor Baines mentioned the access to the water, and I know talking to Councillor Ring, that our access to the water is, to me, amazing now, and it's only going to get better. I don't know if that message isn't getting out to the public. Perhaps we could do a better job. It's not me. Perhaps we could do a better job getting that message out. And there's going to be no part of the waterfront that's inaccessible to the public and only getting better. So I don't know if that fits in with what we're talking about right now, but it's on my mind. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Yes, Madam Mayor.
Under the strategic and planning for the future, I think another big plan that's underway that's worth mentioning is the Master Mobility and Transportation Plan.
That's great, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Stacey. I thought the statement on effective financial management was pretty encompassing. I thought it captured, I'm still going to give it some thought, but I thought it talked about our strong financial position, but the challenges that still we have to deal with. It does talk about the residents believing value for money, which equates for me to be taxes and user fees are in a realm that they think is appropriate. One of the things I was trying with between community and corporation with strengths, inclusivity. I'm trying to see where we kind of capture that, because I think of things like the Unity Collective. And I know in conversations about their own vision, something that comes out of it is a sense of being. And is there somewhere where you would say to me, this is kind of capturing that? I
believe we have it as an opportunity. And I would say sometimes because I did, and thank you again for the comment on the waterfront, and to you, Councillor Baines, as well, because I did do a quick, it's the beauty of, computers. I did a quick look to see, and we did reference the survey finding on that. But, the key elements of the SWOT, the strengths, it is ultimately a framework, but it is not scientific. It is not 100%. And so certainly some things that are strengths are also opportunities to capitalize on. And I think one of those is we have heard that Collingwood is a welcoming and inclusive community. And that's one of those areas where, again, you'll never be done with that is always something that you're going to strive for, to continue to do that. So I think that's a great point. And you're right, it doesn't, I believe, appear in the strengths now, but certainly we have heard that, people enjoy, as part of that, the intimacy and the sense of belonging that they feel that they have when they come here. So thank you. I love a good framework, but it's never foolproof, which is always unfortunate. So I think if we could move to the next one, we had two more here, which is just, I wanted to raise these because these were additions from an initial findings report that we had back in January. But one of the things that we heard was the importance of, that the town doesn't work in isolation, that the town has and works with many community groups, nonprofits, business partners, and things like that, the county, neighboring municipalities to make things happen. And I think that's one of these areas where you have a very strong foundation in terms of how you collaborate across different sectors, across different levels of government. That's also an opportunity moving forward, because a lot of what I think is likely going to appear in your strategic plan, based on what we've heard, are things that you won't necessarily be able to achieve on your own, but by relying on your community, working with other levels of government, partnering with your neighbors and associations and volunteer groups. And of course, the last bit was on community engagement, and that, even through this process and the fact that council approved the completion of a survey, a statistically significant market research survey as part of this, I think shows a real commitment to wanting residents to be part of the conversation on everything you do. I think there's a real interest in making sure the community understands what's happening at the town, that they're aware and consulted, and that they have an opportunity to provide input. That said, community engagement is one of those things where we're always looking at how we could do it differently, better. Technology is changing. People are busy. There's engagement fatigue. And so it's also an opportunity, I think, is to continually evolve. Are we maximizing all the things in the toolbox to make sure that our residents have access to us, that we're building trust and accountability and all of those important things that make everything work together neatly. So let's talk about the more challenging piece, which is around areas of improvement or weaknesses here. And again, these often turn into some of the opportunities. The first is around growth. That there are concerns about how fast the town is going, the ability to keep up with growth, both, hard infrastructure, but also thinking about the services that you provide, concerns around traffic and parking, but also that the very character or feel that the town has could change. And how do you preserve that? How do you protect it? Obviously, housing is incredibly top of mind. It was the #1 finding from the survey, far, I would say, outstripping all other concerns at 31%. Homelessness, I believe, was the second at 11. So I think you have a pretty strong sense of priority here around housing, around affordable housing. We also heard that there are some challenges in the community as it grows. We have people coming together. They may not all have the same priorities about what the town should be doing, what it should be prioritizing. There's also been, an increase in people in distress or vulnerable populations that the town is trying to figure out how to make sure those people have the supports that they have. And Luke, can we just pop to the next slide just so you can get the full picture? We've heard still that Collingwood is, even though it's, there is interest in a significant amount of interest in the community in advancing active transportation, which could include transit, cycling, more sidewalks, pedestrian thoroughfares, things like that. But that Collingwood continues to be car dependent. One of the, I think, most interesting things that we heard and we experienced coming up here today is even though you might have access to different modes of transit or transportation within, to get up here, you kind of got to rely on a car, right? So luckily we carpooled. So we're trying to do our bit as well. But this is something to think about as you grow and as you move forward, how to figure out what are you going to invest in from a transportation perspective. We heard about concern around growth and making sure you have, enough or appropriate community assets. So things like that make your community a great place to live, right? Arenas, multi-use recreation centers. And we know that there are a lot of plans, right? There's concern also about schools, building the new hospital, the wastewater treatment plant, followed by the water treatment plant, continued investment in road infrastructure. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to be able to accommodate and support the growth and keep the quality of life here. We heard a bit, as we do everywhere, so Collingwood's not alone here, about access to healthcare services and physicians. A lot of folks, can't find a family doctor, and that's a challenge. We also heard quite a bit about concerns around labor shortages. We understand that the labor market may be evolving, but we also heard that it's hard for some businesses to find people to work here, in part because they can't also live here. Ties back to the affordable housing piece. And so you can see the ways in which some of these concerns or issues are interconnected. Anything we missed in terms of the community challenges there? I will say the strength slides were longer, so if that makes you feel better. And a lot of these, when you reflect on these, think about some of your neighbors, think about other municipalities. You're not alone in a lot of this, right? You're growing because people want to come here. Growth is also a sign of is something to be, celebrated. You're prosperous, vibrant, but it comes with a price tag, both quantitative and qualitative. All right. Oh yeah, Councillor Baines.
Place to make this comment, but in the survey, there seemed to be a capacity from those respondents for increased taxes and or certainly increased user fees. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you would enter that into a strength or an opportunity, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. And certainly, I think that is an interesting finding, right? That in some cases, I think it was 2 out of 3, maybe. I could be wrong. I think we did put it in here, or it's in our findings report, would be willing to pay more to see enhanced services. But then you've also got around a third that maybe are not. So best of luck to you. But, I think that's part of what we're here to do, right? Is to grapple with that, because all of those community infrastructure assets that I just mentioned, those all have costs associated with them. And how will you balance out the desire for those? Because we heard people want those things, with affordability for residents and making sure that Collingwood can still be a place where everybody who wants to live here can live here. I think, again, you're not alone in that challenge, but it is what you do with it that is what will distinguish you. Anything else? Yes, Madam Mayor.
I don't know if this is a weakness, but I'll just spit it out anyway. I do feel, the affordability, what can we afford as a community? It would be a lot easier if we had a more robust business community. Because as we know, those that pay property taxes as businesses aren't really using services. So they're great to have. So, I feel that it is a bit of a weakness that we don't have a more robust business base. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you. And if we can just move, we'll talk now about challenges of the administration. Just a nice segue into infrastructure and asset management. The town, like, again, so many others, has a significant state of good repair backlog. There's a lot of projects in the pipeline. And I thought it was interesting that the water wastewater plan emerged in the survey as the third most important issue. I don't think I've ever seen that. So you must be doing a good job communicating about the importance of that, because I would say in my experience, not all residents are fully aware of wastewater or water infrastructure or what happens under the, under the ground or where it all comes from. But you've clearly been communicating the importance of that. And I think, residents are starting to wrap their heads around the things that this town needs to grow in an effective manner and in a sustainable manner. So even though it's here as a weakness, I would also applaud you for the communication that you've done on that, because it is difficult sometimes to build buy-in for projects that people can't really see but are essential to their daily lives, right? It's great to have a house. It's better to have a house where you can flush the toilet. Customer service, we've heard that, as in many other places, the town has made some good headway in terms of improving customer service, response times. The creation of Service Collingwood continues. There are some areas where some people feel that, things could be escalated more quickly or addressed more quickly as well. So an area for a continued focus. Alignment on priorities. I think, this is one of the challenges, and that's what we're here to do. So we're already addressing this challenge, which is, how do we figure out how to prioritize, and how do we as council give to staff direction about where we want them to focus, mindful that there are limited resources and a big list of things to be done. The strategic plan can really help guide that and build organizational alignment around what we're here to do and what we want to achieve. Long-term financial planning, we've heard about the need to maybe refocus on this. And certainly a number of municipalities are revisiting, long-term financial plans that they may have done in the past, updating those, building in the costs of, expected infrastructure investments, starting to think about how they're going to fund that and what the long perspective looks like. Very important when you think of the fact that many municipalities continue to operate on an annual budget cycle where you're approving things that will be done in 1 year, but not necessarily you don't have full sight line into everything that needs to be done over 10 years. Again, many are moving towards multi-year budgets to help address that. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you. On this particular one, and CEO Skinner, jump in if I'm not, you don't agree or such or whatever. I don't know the way it reads. I do have some concern about the way it reads. And the reason is that I think the need is to complete our strategic financial plan, which the work has been ongoing for the past few years. So there wasn't one in the past. There were certainly pieces of it, but we want to see it all brought together for exactly the reasons you talked about. When you're making your annual decisions, you're seeing the further financial picture. So I think that does need to be reworded, and totally correct that the idea is that when we're making those decisions, we can see the longer term picture for the financial plan.
Yep, absolutely critical. Thank you for that adjustment there. And the last one here is around, staff, your existing staff complement, but also the capacity. That there's not necessarily consensus on this. There are some folks that think we've got enough staff. Perhaps we're not optimizing them in the way that we could. There are others who think, we simply do not have enough staff to be able to deliver on all these priorities, or it's not necessarily about the number, it's about the expertise, right? And that's why in many cases, as the scope of municipal responsibilities changes, you're seeing municipalities need to go out and look for folks that have expertise in climate change, hiring climate change coordinators or DEI officers or things like that. Worth thinking about, because ultimately there needs to be good alignment, as I said at the very outset, between your strategic plan, your organizational capacity to be able to deliver on it, and the budget in terms of being able to fund it.
And I'm just going to briefly interrupt because we do have a counselor that is online that would like to speak. So I'll just allow her that opportunity.
Thank you. I can't see, so.
She's been having some technical difficulties, but hopefully we can. Oh, there we go. It's just taking a moment to connect to your audio. Okay, it looks like the audio is connected.
But now I think she's on mute.
You'll just have to unmute yourself now. Perfect.
No.
No, we still can't hear.
Possible to dial in, maybe?
We have two. We have a dial in. She's also dialed in as well, it looks like. We have two connections for you, Councillor Doherty, right now. One telephone and one through your phone, but it looks through data. And that could be the problem. Maybe try *5 on your phone as well.
Technology is great until it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Yeah. My apologies. I actually put my hand up when you were still on the previous slide, community weaknesses. But I did want to add something that occurred to me when we saw the community survey results on Monday. And that was economic disparity in our community. And I don't know whether that's captured in the affordable housing issue, but I think it goes beyond, the economic status of even the housed versus others in the community.
Yes, thank you. I think that's an important point, and we're going to make that addition. You may not be able to see, but we noted it down.
Okay, thank you.
So why don't we move on to threats? And these are, threats are the bigger kind of macro level concerns. And I actually think Councillor Jeffrey, a very nice, Doherty, sorry, a nice segue into the threats here around, these are things that through the strategic plan you may want to consider in terms of what the town might be able to do to help mitigate or to, address, or things that need to be considered as you plan for the future. And these are obviously, and some of these are repetitive, but again, I think it bears considering here because housing, affordable housing was the #1 priority. It's the #1 priority in every municipality. This is not an Ontario. It's not a Collingwood problem. It's not an Ontario problem. It's not a Canadian problem. Right now it's a global problem. So worth keeping in mind. Many municipalities are facing some of the challenges. Again, when you think it is, it can be good to know that you're not alone in facing these, but at the same time, it can make it feel almost insurmountable, the scope of the challenge. The other thing is around increasing resident expectations. I think as Collingwood grows, people's expectations around the types of services they want or they need continues to grow, service levels, demands for service. And of course, at the same time, and this goes exactly to what we were speaking around earlier, sometimes there's a desire for more, but not necessarily accompanied by a willingness to pay for more, in part because some people frankly cannot. So how do we balance out, right, the desire for more when not all members of your community feel able to pay more? Changing provincial mandates, this happens every couple of weeks throughout the life cycle of this project. We've got Bill 195 now, so I don't think I need to say much more, but other than that, you need to think about that and prepare for the unexpected in as much as you can, because it does affect the way you do your business and the services that you provide to residents and to, your development community and so many other stakeholders. The economic climate, we've touched on that, and that affects both your residents, but also the municipality. It costs you more this year to deliver the exact same services as you did last year, even without any service enhancements. And so everyone is feeling the pinch. If we can move to the next one, because there's a second slide here. Gap filling for other governments. In many cases, municipalities are stepping in to meet community needs in areas that are outside of their jurisdiction. I can give examples of municipalities getting into affordable housing, for example, or other types of housing, starting to move into a physician attraction and recruitment, bringing in, bonusing, and housing incentives. These are not things typically done by municipalities, but they are stepping in. Think about, shelter programs in other places as well. They're stepping in because, again, your residents look to you for the support and the guidance as the level of government closest to them. And then, climate change continues to be that's one of those ones that's going to always be on our radar now. You need to think about how to ensure that town infrastructure is resilient, but also be prepared to support your residents through potential emergency situations. Was it a year ago or so that we had the forest fires and we couldn't go outside for days? Close to that time. As well as, economic shifts. The economy is changing. And I know, this is also, I think, an opportunity for Collingwood to figure out which way it wants to go. Does it want to grow into the knowledge-based economy? How can you attract remote workers here? What are the opportunities? But also, as the economy changes, you need to be prepared to have your strategy be able to meet those shifts. Tourism impacts, of course. Collingwood is both a vibrant town for people to live, but also has a vibrant tourist economy. But I'm sure we all saw this year that, Luke here comes up to ski, and he did not come up that many times to this area to ski. And so what does that do to the fabric of your community and those businesses that rely on the four-season economy? And finally, the last one, again, and these are all macro level challenges faced by not only Collingwood, but so many others, is the erosion in trust in all levels of government, right? We've seen through social media, through the pandemic, low voter turnout in all recent elections, that there is a sense among the public that they don't understand what some governments are doing for them, that there's not that same trust. And so how do we build back those trust? How do we foster those connections with the people we serve? And how do we make local government and really all government accessible and open? It's a key question. Anything here on the threats, anything that, you think about or you read in the news and you think, this is something we kind of need to be thinking about, we're not gonna be able to tackle, but it's top of mind? Yeah.
Thank you. The town, or the comm staff at the town, has actually started an initiative last year that we're going to the farmers market. We did the Spark in the Park, I think it was called. And I think those were really well received. I do worry about some of the stuff that we're reading on social media, or don't worry about it, but I do see it, and it does bother me a little bit. But as we grow, we do need to find more ways to get us out there. I believe we're heading down a good road. I think it needs to be improved. If I have got any answers, no. But I think we're heading in the right direction as far as getting us out there in the community. Thank you.
We think so too, because we heard that from residents, things like coffee with council, that you're at events. I believe even when we were here at the holiday market, that, you know, I think people here feel that they have access to their leaders and town staff as well. But there is always going to be social media. And so just constantly thinking, as you've said, you know, Councillor Perry, about how making sure we're checking in on how we're communicating, how we're engaging our residents. You know, are we using all the tools in the toolbox? It's good to check in on that. So let's move to the last portion, which is starting to get into the priority setting. And this is around opportunities for the future. And they're in no particular order here. As I've said, we've really been iterating this since November. So in a lot of cases, we've been adding on. And, you know, the first is to continue to foster economic development. I think, you know, we've heard this repeatedly, that there's a very strong foundation here in terms of the business community you have, you know, some of the innovation that you've undertaken and tried to drive forward in partnership with other organizations as well. And this is one of those areas where there's always more to do, right? There's always an opportunity to think about what's next, how to bolster your economy. And part of that, of course, will involve thinking about how to make sure that you've got people to serve these new businesses and enterprises. Building on your reputation, I can't tell you how many times we heard the phrase, "We punch above our weight," on everything from, you know, internal administration to in the community, the things that we're doing on climate change, on business supports, on our parks. I heard about the splash pad repeatedly. I'm sure many of you remember me talking about this. I've got 2 little kids. We punch above our weight. That is an incredible starting foundation for this strategic plan, because I think, and what's not in here, is Collingwood is on the right track. What you're doing is trying to make sure that it stays on the straight and narrow, that it stays on that track and continues to build on those strengths, address some of those challenges. It's also a lofty job when you're starting from something that's pretty good, right? How to make it even better. Growth management, that is going to appear somewhere in this strategic plan. If I have a crystal ball, we know that this is top of mind for residents. We also know that you're at an important moment in thinking about growth and how you want to grow, where you want to grow. What does it mean for the character, the fabric of your town? Throughout the course, even during the life cycle of this project, you've approved a new official plan. We're starting the downtown visioning master plan. You've got lots of exciting projects on the horizon. We've heard about, you know, the waterfront, as well as you've got the Poplar Village, the grain terminals. There's lots ahead, but it also means having some conversations and making sure that everyone is on the same page about what that future looks like and how you can both grow and still have what makes Collingwood, Collingwood, right? And then addressing the housing crisis, and the town is already making some important headway here. You have an affordable housing master plan, but as I said a few moments ago, it's much easier to have a plan, much more difficult to implement a plan, because now you've got the strategy, but it's about putting the resources and the effort to realizing that plan. If we can move to the next one, we've got a couple here. I'll go through them all quickly and then we can talk about them. Building a diverse and age-friendly community. We've heard that Collingwood is welcoming, but we also know that there's an opportunity to continue to make sure that you're a community for all ages, whether that's, you know, folks who move up here to retire, to spend, you know, the best days of their lives up here, to, you know, people with young kids such as myself, that you want to be a community where everyone can find a place. And how do you do that, right? How do you continue to drive diversity in age, in ethnicity, in culture, across the board? The downtown, we've heard that this is the crown jewel of Collington. I told you, Luke and I said so ourselves about an hour and a half ago. You're doing the downtown visioning master plan, and this is an opportunity to set out what the vision for that looks like. Because as you change, as the town at large changes, the downtown's going to evolve too. You have the opportunity to shape the nature of that change. collaboration and planning with partners in the, in the county, but also your neighboring municipalities and Grey County, that, there have been a number of initiatives that have already been undertaken in the South Georgian Bay area to figure out how you can collaborate better or differently to, whether it's deliver better services, shared services, things like transit, for example, to thinking about how you can build on each other's strengths, right? I think that's really important in a time when resources are challenged. This spirit of collaboration, I think we're going to hear a lot about it over the next little while as we map out the strategy. Advocacy as well, right? Working with the other levels of government to get what you need for your community members. It's critical. Because if you think that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and some of you heard me say this, but if you think that they have a file folder, downtown that says everything that Collingwood wants and needs, they don't have that. They don't have that. You have to tell them what you want to need, and you have to have a plan behind it in terms of a sustained advocacy campaign to get what you need. And there's lots of good examples, but in part, I think, it's a real recognition that there is work to do in terms of making sure that you are fighting for your community. You're doing it already. But I think when you look at a lot of the scope of the challenges that we've just talked about, again, you're not going to be able to do it alone. You're going to require the province and the federal government to step up too. And again, continuing to engage your community. If I've just talked about regional collaboration, intergovernmental relationships, you have got people here that want to be part of the solution moving forward. How can you tap into people that want to get engaged, help you figure out how to address some of these challenges? And I think that's a really exciting opportunity, because not everywhere has that, right? You have a community, a volunteer spirit as well. We've got this advisory group as part of this process who volunteer their time to work with members of council and us and staff to figure out what the future looks like. I think that's really exciting. And then a few more. Sustainability. We know the town's done some good work through the Sustainability Task Force, but it's also a challenge because there are limited resources when you think about how you want to ensure a sustainable future, both thinking of the corporation, but also the community. As I said, council staff relations, always a work in progress. So, that's something that you want to continue to make sure that things are working well, that there's strong communication, and that the roles and responsibilities are effectively executed. And the last thing I'd say in terms of just these are some of the more organizational ones is that there's an opportunity as part of this strategic plan to recenter what we think the priorities are, what they should be, and have those inform what your staff do over the next 4 years, inform what goes into next year's budget. But there's also an opportunity here to think about accountability and how are we going to know if we did what we said we were going to do? Well, we're going to have to report and measure on success. And, this is an area that the town is looking at, doing more on in terms of performance measurement. There's some direction as part of this to look at the social development goals through the United Nations as we consider the strategic plan. But I also think it's an important moment to think about, well, what does success look like? And are we measuring how we as a town perform? Or are we measuring the change or the outcomes that we see in the community? Or is it a mix of both? It's an interesting question. I'm quite fascinated myself by performance measurement, but we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty. But a lot of municipalities are starting to become more mature about performance measurement, in part because it can be very difficult to know if what you're doing is achieving the impact that you want. So how can we build in those accountabilities into this strategic plan so that everyone around the horseshoe knows whether or not you've done what you said, and if you didn't, what the reasons for that were? And if things aren't working well, if you aren't making the progress, well, then how can we course correct? How can we get back to something that we can actually move forward with? Any of the other opportunities that aren't here, Deputy Mayor Fryer?
I've gone through them, and I think that it's very encompassing. I was thinking, just jumping back to the regional collaboration portion. where in the middle, it talks about in terms of shared services, programs, facilities, tourism. I think my suggestion would be that workforce should be added into that.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking along the lines of there's no boundary to the workforce in our region, right? But I think there's an opportunity for our people that work even outside the municipality to there's an opportunity there. So I think if we're going to mention tourism, which I understand, I'm thinking the workforce might be a suggestion to put workforce there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I actually have a comment on the same section, which is whether we should be looking at more regional collaboration in terms of providing housing for people who work in this area. There's different municipalities are thinking about it in different ways. And because we have, as our deputy mayor said, we have people who live and work in different communities. They're traveling in and out all the time. And it doesn't mean, it's really hard to draw boundaries around, okay, well, you should be living within this area. I think a more regional approach is an opportunity we have. I also wanted to mention, and I think about this, and I don't know if it's an opportunity, so I'll just say, and you can decide, but we have a little bit of an unusual situation in that the surrounding municipalities, many residents see Collingwood as their downtown or their town. And it's odd, like I'll talk to someone one day who lives near Craigleith, and he said, "Oh, I'm in town every day swimming at the pool." He considers it his pool, Or we had this awesome person apply to sit on our volunteer steering committee for our arts center, who has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for an arts center in Toronto, knows fundraising cold, but she didn't live in Collingwood, right? So it's like, how do we tap into people who feel a real affinity for our community, also want to be part of our community and help build it because they know they're going to use the arts center, they're going to use this, Anyway, I just put that out there as something I think about anyway. And when we come back to it, I have a weakness I thought of, but let's finish this part first.
Yeah.
Just following up on the mayor's point, do we reframe it as the virtual town of Collingwood or the virtual region in a sense? Because those artificial barriers do create perhaps even in our own minds, sort of an artificial barrier, if you will. At any rate, just to add to that point, thank you.
Hoping not to assault your ears this time.
Perfect. We can hear you.
Great. So just picking up on the comments that have been made just now by the mayor and by Councillor Baines, I'm wondering if we could take it a step further, and even should we be thinking about a regional governance structure, a regional government? I'm just putting it out there.
I would say,
Go
ahead.
It's Collingwood's strategic plan. We mentioned regional. We talked about collaboration. We talked about planning. It can come in various forms. I understand what Councillor Doherty's saying, but I'd have probably a little difficulty in thinking that we're going to say something specific like that. So that's my thought on it.
And I think what everyone is saying, which is something that I hear so often and other places too, is the boundaries are artificial. Residents don't really see them. They came about to organize the system of local government, but we do need to find a way to work past them because our residents do, right? We know when we come here, it's not just people that live here. We don't live here, but we visit. And so how do we work together to deliver on priorities that don't, like these concerns that we're talking about, housing, even some of our assets, they're not geographically bound either. It's an interesting question, I think. Councilor
Yeah,
Jeffrey.
thank you. No, and I'll just go back to the mayor's comment with respect to the housing regionally. We did do a process regionally under former Martin Riddle, our employee, and it was a very thorough process where they determined that it was very interesting because each of the 3 municipalities that participated required a different type of housing. So we've already built that foundation. And so I would say it's to continue with or build on our previous work on that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And there was an interesting stat, and I'm going to try to find it, about the number of people that worked in town, that lived in town. And I was surprised with the percentage, but I can't put my hand on that. But the other thought I had when we're talking about opportunities, I think we have a very philanthropic community. Volunteerism wise, I think people willing to donate time and money. When I look through, I don't really see that necessarily captured. And again, I'm looking to you to, if you thought it was captured in something here, then certainly just outline that to me.
Great, thank you. And Madam Mayor, you had a weakness that you wanted to share as well.
Thank you. We're pushing against our south boundary, which is Poplar Road, side road. And that's where our services are. And we have virtually no employment lands left in our community. And we have other lands, but it would cost a lot of money to service them. So to my mind, that's a weakness. I'm not sure. I mentioned before about the importance of business. And certainly it's a priority of our provincial and federal government as well. But we don't have even lands designated employment lands. There's acres. That's it. A couple. So anyway, thank you.
And yes, we did hear that on several occasions. So that's a great addition. So my suggestion would be that we take a very short 5-minute break. If people are amenable, we come back at 4:30. We're going to take these opportunities and start mapping them out into a bit of a strategy. And thank you. Okay, so I think we are ready to reconvene. And I do want to commit that we will finish at 6, as I know some council members have some prior commitments. We also would love to enjoy dinner in the town before leaving. So that's one of the benefits of getting to come up to a place like Collingwood, right, is to take advantage. So the next focus is really starting to look at a draft strategic framework that we have put together. And by strategic framework, we mean those core elements of the strategic plan. And so, this is kind of a classic structure of a strategic plan. And we can talk more about what we think the structure for Collingwood might look like. This is fairly standard. You've got a vision, a broad vision for the next, planning cycle. You've got a mission that is really about what you do every day. And then you've got strategic goals that are accompanied by action items and performance measures or KPIs. Underpinning all of that is often most municipalities have a set of values, and those are principles or philosophies that you bring to everything you do. And by you, I'm thinking of council, but also staff. And we'll talk more about vision, mission, and values in our last component today. But I'd like to remind you of where we're starting from, because I think one of the pieces of feedback we heard when we started this process back in October, November, was that this is, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, that this strategic plan is an evolution, that we're taking what we had, deciding, what still matters to us, what's still relevant, what resonates, where do we need to change, where do we need to shift the focus? And so without, just by way of introduction, we have a strategic plan framework here. And I think we may have lost one of our slides that introduces this, but I'll give you the Coles Notes version here on what this is. This is our first draft based on everything we've heard as to what we think a potential strategic framework could look like. And so what you see here are pillars. Those are the colored boxes. And then you've also got goals that are in the gray boxes. And the pillars each have a statement that are intended to give readers a sense of what we mean by that pillar, because otherwise managed growth is just 2 words. What does that actually mean? What are we trying to do there? What does it say to us? I will say this is a first draft. This is only intended to spur discussion. We had a chance to give it a test run at a steering committee meeting that we had earlier this week. We made a couple of changes, but now we're here to gather your feedback. And the question we want to ask is, are there gaps here in terms of the goals? Are there things that are missing? Is this on the right track? Are you guys way off base? And a couple of cautionary comments before I'll open the floor to all of you. The first is that nothing is set in stone. Every word on this page is open for discussion. The verbs, adjectives, the goals themselves, everything. We just did this because it is much easier to work from something on a page than a blank page. The second thing is that what you don't see here are the how. What are the activities that the town is going to undertake to encourage the development of a range of housing options across the housing spectrum? There's no how here. That's for the next phase of the process. And as I've said, we're going to be coming back to you with some options as to what that looks like. But here we're focusing on priority setting. These are the things that you want to achieve. This is the direction that you want to go. So I'll turn it over to you. Any comments? Right track, wrong track? Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Having had the opportunity to be part of the earlier session, I remember one of the things we talked about was, and you mentioned, and I don't think you just did now, the interconnectivity of some of these, that they're like, I think at one of the comments that was made about the visual appearance of it is that the boxes kind of look like they're segmented, and if there's a way to portray it as being interconnected, and I don't have a easy way to do it, because if you did it like a wheel kind of thing and you had arrows going through it, does it mean that it's only it's just that they're all kind of interconnected?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. This is kind of a classic way, as I've said, of structuring it. But one of the things that it does is it reproduces the silos that can exist in municipal government or administration. It assumes, for example, that that housing is untouched from the goal that's right beside it, which is workforce development, which is separate from protecting Collingwood's natural environment and built-in heritage, when actually you would need staff from across the organization and all departments to be able to move any one of those things together. And what you do on housing impacts the workforce development and it impacts the downtown. Everything is interrelated. And from my perspective and my experience, sometimes that's a good test as to whether or not something is a strategic goal or if it's more of a project or an action item. Is this something that will require cross collaboration, that will require consideration of a broad range of factors? That's a big thing. That's a transformative thing. That's strategic. And I think the deputy mayors, and through the comments we received at the steering committee, we're going to need to think about the structure. I've seen, and we've created at Strategy Corp strategic plans that are more like Venn diagrams or that are more circular in nature. And that way you're not saying any one particular pillar is most important, but actually all of these things on this page are how you drive the community that you want to see, right? All of these things are integral to a complete Collingwood. Lots of thoughts. And I will say, what I'd like to hear from you first is just your general comments on this overall framework. And then what we're going to do is actually work through each goal, each pillar, sorry. So if you have specific comments, but any kind of general comments looking at this on a page? Yeah.
It would seem to me that on the top line, they're very aspirational and justifiably so. I mean, we are a community where everyone belongs. It is a generalistic aspirational statement, but I think it's an important aspirational statement. I suppose the only specific I would have is under environmental sustainability. And I don't want to wordsmith this because it's where you say environmental and collaborative with our partners. And the word partners, at least from my perspective, implies sort of an equal force, if you will, that the town would be partnering with. Having said that, I don't know a more appropriate word because partners is more inclusive, whether they are equal or more powerful or less powerful. So I give credit to you and to the wordsmiths because although I question that one word, I don't have an alternative for it. So I would leave it as it is. Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. And of course, it's never a good idea to wordsmith by committee. So we'll take it back. We'll take your comments back. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Stacey. So I really like how actually transparent and accountable government stretches underneath. I would almost even stretch them over top because they really are a lens for every one of the other pillars. But for me, these are very operational accountabilities, and I'm not really seeing governance accountabilities in there. So I think from a council responsibility in how we govern ourselves and to achieve the goals, it would be something else that would need to appear in there for me.
That's interesting. And certainly, it doesn't look that much different from the plan that you had. And Luke, if you can just flip us up. But one of the things that we have done is this transparent and accountable government. We did stretch it across the bottom. I'm glad you picked up on it. And folks also picked up on it at the steering committee meeting because that is what we're doing here. That is all of you, that is staff. And it's about how you engage with your community as well. If you don't have the good governance, let's say, or the people, your staff, the tools, think of financial resources, think of even processes or policies, then you can't do any of the things above the purple line, right? If you don't have staff, you're not going to be able to, move forward with the Affordable Housing Master Plan. And if you don't have good governance, then you may not be making decisions that are advancing these priorities, right? And you're no further along in 4 years than you were when you started. And so from our perspective, this, what we might call more of an internal facing pillar about everybody in this room, it's critical to making sure everything else happens, because you need the people, that's all of you and staff. You need the money, it's the town's financial position, and you need the tools, that's policies, that's procedures, it's technology to be able to move things forward. And I would say that in older strategic plans, they only focused on the external things, the things that mattered to the community. But I think there's awareness through this process that we actually need to be stewards of driving these things forward, council, staff, and others. So thank you for that comment. And I liked your comment on the governance piece as well.
Could I just, yes,
Yes.
because I don't think you can call it transparent and accountable government if it's only reflective of operational goals. So that might be transparent and accountable operations for me. It's just, that's how far it kind of went for my interpretation. So, but I do appreciate all the other comments that you made to put it in perspective a bit.
Thank you. So why don't we move to the first pillar and hear your kind of specific thoughts on this. And this is about managed growth. And as I've said, nothing's off the table in terms of changes. I would say I don't particularly find managed growth to be the most aspirational pillar name, but a good starting point, because it really is about, I think what we could probably safely say is the top issue in the community, which is how you grow. And you see in here housing, the number one priority for residents, the downtown, also a critical, priority, and then asset management and investing in infrastructure. And within these would be specific action items that staff would move forward over the next few years to deliver progress. How do you feel about these goals? How do you feel about the adjectives? Are they ambitious enough for you? Are they too ambitious? Because it really is about striking a balance between wanting to be aspirational, but also mindful of what you can do. Madam Mayor.
Well, the first one about housing continuum, one thing we've tried to focus on and came out of our affordable housing master plan was recognizing there's a housing continuum, but that maybe our focus should be more on housing for people who work in Collingwood, because that is a huge need. And, it's easier for us, I'll say, in some ways to maybe I'll just throw an example, work with the employers. There's so many ways we can get at this if we're focusing on that. The other thing is on the downtown. I don't know if we need stronger language, because we have been so fortunate here to have our downtown survive. And I know we don't have a mall, which is a big deal for downtowns. But there's other things that I see coming that are going to nibble away at our downtown. And I just want to make sure we're not, for me anyway, we're not only supporting it, but like making it a primary area of focus, if I can say that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because in a lot of other plans over my time doing this, you see, especially in the last 2 years since COVID, you see words like revitalize the downtown, reinvest in the downtown. You're not needing to do that. You have a vibrant downtown, but how do you make sure that it continues to be so? Yeah, and enhance, yeah. Councillor Bates.
What I like about the first bullet is that it essentially gives license to councillors to ask the hard questions when development applications come in front of us. And where are more affordable housing units within this development proposition, or even if you expand it, actually, a convenience store or something to get away from the restrictions that we have on you need a car for everything. This gives credence, if you will, to that view that our developers and developments must change to accommodate what we see the reality will be, particularly in regard to housing. And for that, it's, I think, appropriate and encouraging to councillors, I think. So well done in that. Thank you.
To give you a sense of what some initiatives could look, and again, I haven't talked about this with anyone, I'm making them up on the fly, but implementing the Affordable Housing Master Plan, like really committing to implementing that, or continuing to improve your development approvals process, or creating new guidelines or policy documents. Those are some options. We're going to, again, bring things back to you, but just to give you a sense of some of what that could look like. Because I know it is challenging, because when you look at it on a page, it feels pretty good because it doesn't have anything attached to it yet, right? How do we make it real? But your comments, especially on some of the language, is important, because the verb is really going to guide what we bring back to you. So thank you. Other comments here? What oh yeah.
Thank you. Just continuing on the three bullets there. The second one, I'm glad that you used start that as continue, because it's like you're saying, people are in other municipalities are saying they want to revitalize. Well, I think it's important that with the word continue there means that we've got a pretty nice downtown, and just to continue to work on keeping it that. And the mayor had made a comment earlier about not having malls, and living here as long as I have, that's by design, for the simple reason that it would keep a vibrant downtown. And so past councils have made a point of not expanding like a lot of other municipalities did, and then having ghost towns on your main street. So I was glad that you used the word continue in that specific bullet there.
It is intentional. You'll see it continue a couple of times in the framework, and it is intentional. It's not to dismiss in areas where we don't use it, that to say that you're not doing things, but there are a number of areas in which you or the community is at a certain stage, and we wanted to acknowledge that, and that is okay. Not everything in your strategic plan needs to be net new. There's a lot of good that you're already doing, that it's more about pushing things forward, evolving it, and that's okay. I think, again, thinking back to what we heard on your last strategic plan, is this is an evolution. This is pushing it to the next planning cycle. We're not starting from scratch here. Other comments on this one? Anything around?
It looks like we have Councillor Doherty.
Oh, great.
Oh, now her video's off. But if Councillor Doherty would like to speak.
Thank you, Clerk Almus. No, the Zoom had dropped, so I was just logging back on, but thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
Anything on the last goal here? I mean, we've talked about how important this is to the community, and that's kind of exceptional. And I would say not all strategic plans include something like this, because it's kind of operational in nature. But you can also say it deserves to be here because of the size of the investment required, the work required to make sure that you have the infrastructure you need to support the community you have today and moving forward, that you're sending a signal that out into your community, we hear you on this and we are going to invest. Deputy Mayor Frey.
I thought it was fine as it read. Again, one of the points raised at the meeting was that our growth and recent growth situation has produced us into this infrastructure debt situation, so to speak. I think was the term that was used, that it hasn't been able to keep up because the planning wasn't anticipating the growth level that we had. So I thought the wording was fine as it read, and I do agree with you. I think it does belong because of the situation we're coming into this 4 years.
Oh, sorry, Stacey.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, I just, wondered if it should be a continue to invest in critical, because we have been doing a really good job and we have been finding wins for our asset management and our reserves and our funds and things. So I think a continue to in there, and not to suggest we're starting from scratch per se.
CAO Skinner. Oh.
This is a council workshop, so I would only say something that, may or may not be picked up by the members, but just in hearing people talk, one of the things about Collingwood is that we're quite small, and really you can only build it once. Well, you can rebuild, but there's probably a 50 or 100 or 200 year cycle on that. So we want to build really well. And some of the things that I've heard council talking about and asking questions are about, sufficiency of electrical supply. Where are we going to put the new high school? Do we have enough long-term care? And where will that long-term care sit? If the hospital moves, what will happen to the hospital location? So I feel like the third one down about the continuing to invest in critical infrastructure and asset management, super near and dear to my heart. That said, I wonder if at the council level, and you do have it here in advocate for community priorities, potentially might be where you're thinking some of this might fit. But I feel like there's a need for council to know, do we have enough long-term care and where is it? Do we have the electricity for the needs that we have? There are these things that council may be advocating for, or that they are not directly responsible for, but are about building Collingwood into the complete, beautiful Disneyland community that we know we can be.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first thing I wrote down when I came in here today on my little notepad, because I'm always scribbling something, is similar to what our CEOs just said. And that is, and I don't know where it fits in here, and maybe it's here, but, we're living in an era of so much change, and particularly in Collingwood, there's lots of change. And as we think about the electricity infrastructure, because that's a good one, because the province is worrying about it, the federal government's worrying about it, the province through the independent electricity, whatever they call it, is trying to push the worry down to us. There's just, how do we look ahead and always be trying to prepare for our future? And what our future needs are might look different even tomorrow. Things move so fast, right? But I sort of feel we have to be focusing on always, where are we going here? And, how are we going to get there? So that's one thing. The other thing, I know. We have some major change coming in different areas of our community. And one, of course, is down on Poplar Side Road, where there's the regional health and wellness village proposed. And what is contemplated there is, I'll call it a small town. Right? It's going to be a substantial change to our community. And my comment is that we work to make sure that everything is, if the word's integrated, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I'll say into the existing fabric of our town, whether it's the residences, there'll be new different kinds of businesses or medical centers there. I think they're still trying to work through what the original looked like in terms of on the ground, partners or tenants or people who are going to buy land. But I just feel it's going to be really important for us to be, as that builds out, and it will be over a long period of time because of all of which proposed, but we're continually working to make sure that it fits into our fabric on every level, social, economic, housing, okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think that's an important point. Feels like Collingwood. It's not like you get to that development and you feel like you're in a different town, right? And it's funny, on our drive in, we were noticing a new building going up, and actually we commented how the design of the building felt like it was supposed to be a call out to the old industrial area and things like that. And so how can you grow, but in a way that still feels like an integrated community? You know, like you don't have these different pockets necessarily. Councillor Bates.
In regards to specificity, at the third point, invest in critical infrastructure. And I suppose that's a value judgment. I've had some citizens say, a MRF is not a need, it's a want. A living arts center is not a need, it's a want. I would say that is critical the definition of council's definition of critical, or is it the community or the town's view of critical?
Mm-hmm.
At least in your presentation here.
It's a good point. And I actually am not sure that we would be prepared to stand up for the word critical. It could, maybe we think about it, we mean core, like the wastewater and the water and the roads. But actually, when we look at the survey findings, there's a whole lot else on the list. And that should probably be something that councils deliberates at a future time, because I'll say this and I'll say it at our next meeting too. You're not making decisions with the strategic plan. You're prioritizing, you're setting priorities. Everything that's in here is going to come back to you through staff reporting, through the budget, and that's where you'll make decisions about whether to proceed with certain things. What you're putting in here is a commitment to decide in the future. You're deciding to decide. So I would actually suggest that we may want to leave that open, because it is in the eye of the beholder. And we know from the survey that not all residents agree on where the funds should be spent in terms of some of those key projects.
I think I would agree, actually.
Thank you. I was reading it in more of a general sense, looking at it as a goal. So I agree fully with the idea of the continue to invest in, and I like maybe key infrastructure criticals that, and not necessarily that was coming from the municipality. Mm-hmm. But it was collaboration, as Mayor pointed out. One of the concerns we have, especially in the specific, is the electricity capacity of the municipality being able to meet needs. So, as I said, I was again, I had the beholder, and that I was looking at it in that general sense of not necessarily that Collingwood is the only one investing. Mm-hmm. We'd find ways to get that investment done.
Yeah,
type of thing.
Let's move on, if we can, and pending any additional comments, to our next priority, which is, again, a pillar around economic prosperity. The statement, we foster a dynamic and resilient economic ecosystem driven by innovation and an entrepreneurial spirit. And we've got 4 goals here. There have been a couple of changes here since the steering committee meeting that we had earlier in the week, but we welcome your feedback here as well. And I will say, similar to the SWOT, and Luke, if you can just go back up to the framework slide. One of the things you could say is, are things under the right pillar, and should the downtown be here, or is it about growth, or is it about community vitality? And, I don't think we need to, we've already kind of talked about how we're seeing it on a page because it makes it easy for us to process. That's not how it is in reality. That actually the downtown probably fits into all 4 of these pillars, as does workforce, as does housing. And that's maybe what makes it belonging of a spot in the strategic plan. So I don't, we can have the conversation about where something fits, but I'm also aware that it is somewhat arbitrary, and strategic planning is not a perfect science. It's more of an art, and it's about what feels right for Collingwood and what the ultimate goal of something is. So I say that mostly because what you don't see her explicitly in one of these 4 goals is a reference to the downtown, because it lives elsewhere. So comments here, Madam Mayor?
One thing that a business owner who's a successful business owner mentioned to me recently is transportation out of Collingwood. And you mentioned that yourself. And for him, he felt that having public transit connections to the GTA, and for his purposes, Waterloo, were critical for attracting employees. And it was in part because a lot of people who might come here have family in the GTA and they want to be able to get back and forth. And also, well, anyway, I think that's it covers it. Thanks.
Had that conversation multiple times tonight, actually. So other comments there? What else here? And I think we, in the first goal tried to recognize that it's thinking about what, you, Madam Mayor, said in our last session before the break around that regional piece, that it's local and regional workforce development, that it is breaking down the boundaries a little bit and thinking about how you can work together with your neighbors to make sure that your businesses have employees here and that they've got employees there and everything's hunky-dory and you've got a prosperous region of which Collingwood as a town will benefit from.
In your third bullet, could you flip the two, what are they, verbs? Support business expansion and retention. I put the emphasis on expansion rather than sort of defensively like retention. It's a small point, but thank you.
Thank you.
Should the word, like somewhere in that realm, attract as well, business? I think Mayor Hamlin talked about, I mean, it's great. Tourism's great and we're always going to have that, but I do think we need to be multifaceted as far as employment goes. Whether it's lands or attracting business, I know we need employment lands, but we need to attract employers as well, I think.
And certainly that's business attraction, retention, expansion. That's a classic 3-pronged that is pretty standard in economic development. So we'll definitely consider that as well. And there's opportunities here around, we've talked about the knowledge economy and post-secondary institutions. There's a lot that could actually be bucketed under here. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thinking of if this is one of our goals, economic prosperity, should we have some wording in here about the prosperity of our residents? Like everything here is, it does talk about workforce, and I recognize that's part of the residents. So I have no thought on what it would be at this point in time, but I just was thinking as I was looking at it, is there some way to capture that too? And again, talked about how some of these are interrelated, so it could be covered in another way in another area.
I think that's a great point, and it builds on Councillor Doherty's comment, right? Around that was one of the findings in the survey, or the challenges that people are having with regard to their own affordability and prosperity. What I would encourage us to think about as we look at that, and we can certainly look at this with staff and then through the next workshop as well, is what would that look like from the town's perspective? What activities do you think you could undertake? What resources would you be willing to commit to supporting residents in terms of making their lives more affordable? But you raise a good point, because certainly we've heard about it, right? Throughout the SWAT. Any other comments here? Anything that you're surprised that you don't see? Generally feels like it hits a lot of the things that you have talked about. Yeah, I see some nods. All right, let's move down to the next one where I have some additional food for thought for you. Some of the stuff we put in here to be deliberately provocative to get council thinking about. This is one of them. So environmental sustainability. We are stewards of our natural environment and work with our partners to create a more sustainable future for all. We've chatted about the word partners, and one of the reasons that we've used that language twice here, actually in goal 3 as well, is because we know that the town has the climate action team, right? That the volunteer group that does a lot of work in terms of community sustainability. And I would say the first 3 are common in many municipal strategic plans. There's the things that you're going to do to support your natural environment. We could potentially add the waterfront here as well. We've made the addition of built heritage as well. So these would be things around tree canopy and, forestry or There's lots of different things, implementing certain plans. The second is around what you as a corporation are doing to take action on climate change. So the town has a corporate climate change action plan. I believe it's still in step 2. I could be wrong on that. I'll look to your CIO later on in the process. But, how is the town doing its part in terms of greening the fleet, in terms of energy efficient facilities? Maybe we should have left the room dark. I'm not sure. But, what is the town doing, the 4 walls of the corporation? But then a lot of municipalities, and I think this speaks to something, your last comment as well, Deputy Mayor, is how can we as a town support our residents in adopting a more sustainable way of living? That's a big bucket of things. That's a big undertaking, right? It's not something you can control. You do see some municipalities looking at doing retrofit programs or, offering certain incentives or things like that. That may or may not be something you already do or want to do. But we also know that you have partners in the community that want to help support the community itself and support your residents in moving forward with some of that. So I open those 3. I'd like to open it up.
Thank you. I've been trying to figure out where to bring developers into this conversation, and this was the one I was kind of thinking was the right spot because we do mention partners. And so we talked about partnering with nonprofit and local groups. I think we're going to need an ongoing partnership with our development community. We recently went through some green design standard information from the climate action team and just put through a motion that Mayor Hamlin had put on the floor to try to talk to the government, provincial government, into doing something in the building code. But as it stands presently, it's going to be basically, if we do put some standards together, the participation from the development community is going to be on a voluntary basis to some degree. We have a SCAP and things like that we can work some of it through, but I do think that maybe development belongs in that partner box and with the nonprofits and the local groups.
Yep, I think that's a great addition. It reminds me of something that Councillor Baines said earlier around how could we use under the housing one to push developers to maybe do what we want, we need, or we desire them to do. Maybe this is an opportunity to partner with them as well, not just on building the type of housing that your community needs, but also making sure that that housing is supporting the long-term sustainability, the resilience of the community, things like green building standards and that sort of thing. And you're right, as it stands today, we need to be on a voluntary basis, and they need to want to do it. So how can you collaborate with everyone? Oh, great. And then I know the mayor had her hand up as well. Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. So I'm considering the first bullet, the protect and enhance, calling with natural environment. Some municipalities are putting a value, a dollar value on their natural environment, including it as part of their asset inventory. And so in that way, when we put value on it, then we consider it annually. How do we protect and enhance this financial asset that we have that protects our citizens, that assists in stormwater absorption, and so on?
Thank you. I've certainly heard of that as well, and the costs of looking at the flip side, if you did not have these natural assets as well. Mayor Hamlin.
Thank you. I had 2 comments. One was on being a municipal leader in taking action. And I wanted to say that I see this as a bit broader than you described, because we are currently getting underway, I believe, a community climate action plan, which, I'm not really sure exactly what that means, but I know it's beyond what as a corporation that will be encouraging. And so I'd like to make sure that whatever comes out of that we're able to, promote it.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing is on the partnering again. I'm not right sure. I like the idea about including developers, but I even want to make it broader, like others, because I know we've heard from the companies that are involved down on our terminals revitalization project. They're thinking about district energy heating system. And there might be lots of opportunities to partner there with other, as the municipality helping, but to bring, very climate friendly energy to lots of other buildings, if I can put it that way.
Mhm.
So, and also, we've enhanced our tree canopy substantially over the last 4 years, 700 trees, and we'll be doing more this year through a donation by someone who has a residence in Town of Blue Mountains, but who I knew from my former life in Toronto. So I want to make sure we have all these opportunities and maybe local groups, community groups is what is the word that comes to my mind on that one. So thank you.
And can I ask one question building off of that? If number 2 is broader and includes both corporate and community, are partnerships really something that falls underneath that? Or do you view that as important enough, substantial enough that it should be separated as a goal versus something that you will do?
For me, I like it separate because, the second bullet to me is us saying, hey, province, let's fix up the building code. We could do better on this front. Or maybe it's, we really want to get green development standards. We don't know how to do that yet, so we're not taking a big step. But when the opportunity presents, we'd like to be a municipal leader and those kinds of things. Whereas I think the partnering with community groups or others, as I'll call it, is, different kind of an initiative, to my mind at least.
Councillor Bates.
I have a comment about nonprofits and local groups, but it really doesn't pertain to environmental sustainability. It's a general observation. When I moved up in 2011, I Googled service clubs Collingwood. There were 19 organizations. I'm a member of the Optimist Club, which is a service club. There are now 4 in Collingwood. And Ottawa has a Boy Scouts troop. Collingwood does not. If you did a measure of where we were in 1989 of all those sorts of community groups, call them, if you will, and to where we are today, it's the drop, the loss of groups is unimaginable, quite frankly. Well, I won't say that. It's just concerning. However, I don't necessarily believe that's a municipal responsibility. And it's just a comment. There's little I think our municipality can do, although if it's a shared objective, it'd be lovely to do. But I think it's one considered and rejected, unfortunately. Thank you.
It's funny. My mother lives in Bolton or Schaumburg, sorry, and still does Legion events. But you see, but in so many communities, the Legion has put on so many events, has supported parks and things like that. And you are seeing some of those volunteer organizations kind of disappear as well. I was a Girl Guide for 20 years and there aren't as many of those groups around as well. So I think that resonates in a lot of communities. And then how do you fill those voids? What fills those voids? Because they were important contributors to the community. Perhaps something to think about for our next pillar. But I did want to touch on one thing here, and that's the last goal around active transportation and transit. Transit is a form of active transportation, but we've also heard a lot about it that maybe it warrants pulling out a bit. How do we feel about the word expand here? Is that strong enough? Is that too strong? Do we like this? Thoughts? Oh, good.
I wanted to capture that councillors' comments about not only across town, but to town. So from the GTA in particular. And Councillor Potts actually had a really good comment a day or so ago along these lines with respect to other municipalities, particularly Clearview, that I was hoping he would mention, but he hadn't yet. So I wanted to make sure it got in here.
Yeah, thanks. I look at, I mean, transit kind of, it touches on almost everything, or transportation. And I focus a lot on the workforce here, and I know in the industry that I'm currently in, and a lot what I've heard from is we have a lot of residents that live in our neighboring municipalities, but there are a lot of employees that live in the neighboring municipalities that rely on the transportation to get here. And again, it comes down to timing as well. So currently there's a lot of restrictions on the hours of transportation in transit, and I think that when we look at, when it comes to volunteering in groups and working and tourism, and even people that want to come to, stay here and enjoy the municipality and go to the village or go to Wasaga Beach, they're kind of restricted. So I believe in a real regional collaboration on it, and because we rely on those workforce and we need it bad. So.
And this could be a good spot for maybe including the word regional somewhere for us, something for us to think about, to be really explicit about it. It's local and regional. Other comments here, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, I think transit is a little explored opportunity for our community. And because, we've been looking for we're trying to fill a position, and we have said we want to move forward with on-demand transit and expand our lines, but our transit routes, I should call. But, my way of thinking, our transit is subpar, and expand doesn't really cover it. Because it only covers, I'm just going to guess half the municipality. The routes are 20 years old. But I think it's, we've moved ahead on encouraging accessory dwelling units in homes, and we're starting to get them now. But I'll just give you an example. Someone said to me, my neighbor has a unit. They have a person there who works at the nursing home up on Hume Street, but their shifts are such, there's no transit. And so it's like 4-kilometer walk in the middle of the night, or, so there's actually people in the community who are getting up, 5 a.m. to drive them to work and drive them. I mean, it's not sustainable, right? Like there's a whole part around moving our employees, moving our community. And I tend to think that if transit was easy, we wouldn't be having such a focus on the need for parking downtown. If you could walk out to the end of your street and get on a bus and be downtown in 10 minutes, unless you're carrying 25 bags of groceries, it might cover most of your, needs. So that's my own thoughts on it. Thanks.
So let's move to the next pillar. I want to keep us moving here. And this is around your community and everything that makes this a great place to live. So the first one is around enhancing the health, well-being, and safety of the entire community, so that a nod to being inclusive. Also, we view this one as an evolution from what you have currently, because there is a similar goal in the last strategic plan. And again, there's plenty of work to be done here, and work that is underway at the town and at the county as well, and among some of your neighboring municipalities. We've also got a specific call out for celebrating Collingwood as an inclusive community for all ages, ethnicities, cultures, and abilities, to reflect the work that is ongoing and will continue to make sure it's diverse and accessible moving forward. We had the privilege of speaking with the Accessibility Committee earlier on this year. And then the last is an evolution from your last strategic plan as well, around arts, the importance of arts and culture, and the events that you host here as well. That's here. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Stacey. So the other thing too is as important as arts are too, in terms of health, I think sport is important for community vitality.
Good. Yes. Yep.
This goes back to I think one of my first comments was, I was talking about the sense of belonging and that. So I think dialogue has to be in here somehow. Ongoing dialogue, or council may think that this, but we really need to make sure there's that progressive dialogue amongst the people who can tell us, right? And I mentioned Unity Collective as an example, right? So it seems to me like we need to have that ongoing dialogue portrayed in it somehow. But
I think that's a great addition. Councilor Bates.
I'm not crazy about the word celebrate in the second bullet there. It seems to me that it's sort of resting on our laurels as distinct from the sense of continuing to be proactive. I'm not sure what the word is. I'd just like to get some sort of continuing proactivity in that. Good luck. Thank you.
That's what we're here for. Madam Mayor.
I think an important part of ensuring our communities has lots of vitality is to continue a focus on encouraging young families here to move here. And to supporting our youth. So as they grow, and get educated, they ultimately come back. We are starting to see that to happen. But I want them to come before they're in their 50s. I want them to come in their 30s and raise their kids here. And this is what's going to build our community and make it sustainable into the future. We know that our average age is higher than the provincial average. I think we have to work harder to make sure we're building from the bottom so that we have the employment base that we need and the volunteers that we need, like the fact that we don't have as many, scout groups as possible. Maybe it's because we don't have enough, 30-something fathers, I don't know. I'm just, throwing that out there, but I just think that's still a really important part of that. Thanks.
And again, you can see the ties to everything else, right? The drive until you qualify for a mortgage, that's a real thing. I experienced it myself. I live in Hamilton from Toronto. And I think, young families are wanting to come here. But when you think about the availability and the affordability of housing, or thinking about job opportunities in transit, there are some challenges that may be hindering that as well. So it's, again, this integrated and holistic perspective. You really need to untangle. It's a bit like a web, right? Where you're teasing apart all of the different threads as to what makes this community great today, but what's going to sustain it moving forward. Other comments here? Let's talk about the last one. And this is around the transparent and accountable government. We've already got some feedback.
Can I interrupt?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I did have my hand up. And so, yes, going back to community vitality. There's a lot to be said for the built form of a community, and that it nurtures a sense of belonging when the built form is people scaled. So that is to say, not, 12, 15, 20-story buildings, but, much shorter than that, not 6-lane roads, narrower roads, lots of sidewalks, lots of green interspersed, like pocket parks, etc. So I would suggest that where we foster community belonging through arts, culture, and events, perhaps we could add built form.
I think that's a great point. And again, speaking to the way everything is tied together.
Yeah.
And thank you. And I apologize. You're directly horizontal to me, so I can't always see the screen there. And I apologize for missing you. All right. So let's move on to transparent and accountable government. And this is really an internal facing pillar about how you're, what you need, what are the key success factors or enablers to being able to deliver on everything we just talked about for the community you serve. We've received some good feedback already from Councillor Jeffrey around needing something around governance here and the leadership of council as well. But overall, how do we feel about some of these goals? Ensuring effective financial management. I think we've already potentially hinted at some of the strategic actions or initiatives that could make this real, including the strategic financial plan. Continuous improvement in service delivery. And I know staff have a lot that they're working on to look at how they, can workflows and process and training and professional development for staff as well. Your human resources, right? Making sure that, you've got the talent you need and the expertise that you need to deliver on community priorities. And I can say as Strategy Corp and myself specifically are currently supporting the Association of Municipalities of Ontario on a workforce development strategy. And this is extremely top of mind. It is very difficult right now to attract municipal staff. For a range of reasons, in part just due to the competition with other sectors. And so, a lot of municipalities are developing, people strategies or human resources, retention and recruitment strategies to really make sure that they're being straight up articulate about what makes them an employer of choice and why people should want to come and work for the town of Collingwood.
Not to get in the weeds on that, but if we were, I think this the Financial Post does the 40 top employers in Toronto or Canada or Ontario, I'm not sure which, but if we could ever have a goal to try and be one of those top employers, and likewise, if we could utilize the reverse of our business cards that has a message somewhat to the effect of consider Collingwood as your next employer or something to that effect, because we're handing these out, at least I am, all over the place. So let's promote, come work for the town. At any rate, thank you.
Stacey, just commenting on your work at AMO, I think another problem we've seen really is the competition between municipalities, and that's a lose-lose all the way around. So I think that's critically important in this piece.
You're absolutely correct. And a lot of municipalities are starting to look at regional approaches and even things like how do we have one building inspector for two municipalities? It doesn't work everywhere, but realizing that they need to be creative and making sure that the talent that they have the talent that they need, particularly because poaching is so common. It's a real challenge. And I think, you want to retain the great people that you have. So what do you need to do that? We've also got something in here, and the fourth one is around, I see we've got a hand up, and then the deputy mayor. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I'm wondering, is this where we would add something like fostering a healthy democracy? You mentioned AMO's project with the workforce development. That's another very high priority AMO project. And we are a transparent and accountable government should result in a citizenry that feel empowered.
Yep.
And so I think that there should be some mention there about our commitment to the fostering of a healthy democracy. And then also in terms of our elected officials, that everything that we do encourages and enables anyone to run for an elected position, that they shouldn't be held back by income or time of day or any of the other roadblocks at times to participating in government.
I think that's a great point. And I think you may have just done our job for us in terms of this last goal. Maybe instead of continuously explore opportunities to enhance civic engagement, bit wordy, but maybe it is more about fostering a healthy democracy, of which communications and engagement is an initiative under that. A thought. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you. Not sure how the wording would do it, but I noticed in the survey results that in the measure that was found about whether they thought there was effective financial management, it was one of the lowest scores for the very good and I think satisfactory was the other part. And it wasn't, I think it was in the 66 range or that type of thing. But I do believe that in some of those measures, we maybe haven't communicated well enough to so when we say ensure effective financial management, I'm just thinking, can we introduce the idea that we need to communicate that, report that, or provide that information to the residents? Because as I said, when I saw that number, I was a little surprised, but I thought, well, and it goes to what we talked about strategic financial plan, things like that. There's pieces out there, and maybe some pieces that, well, once they're joined together, people would see the bigger picture.
We found that one of the things I worked on last year was the City of Toronto long-term financial plan, and we certainly found that showing the big picture and not always the annual picture of Toronto's shortfall, which was, or fiscal pressure over the next 10 years, which was $46.5 billion, which is, it's a good lesson for anyone, for any municipality. But that almost served as an education tool, not only for members of council, but also for the community around, these are the things that we have said we want to do. These are what the costs are. These are what our forecast looks like. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And I think having the full breadth of information is actually very important to helping community members also understand, not just yourselves as you're making decisions about where to invest, but also so that your community can see what's coming and also how they're going to benefit. And thinking about, not only the cost of what it takes to do it, but the cost that they reap from having that service or that new asset as well. So I think that's a great point. Yes, Councillor Bates.
It may sound or come across as chest thumping, but I think the $8.2 million judicial inquiry and what the last council did in regard to our practices is probably admirable for the rest of the 444 municipalities to take a look at what we have done as a result of that. And it may be, again, self-aggrandizing for us to pat ourselves in the back to that regard, but somewhere or another, it should be noted that we saw a problem, faced it, changed our behavior, and could be perceived, I would think, by an objective observer, perhaps the clerk may know from other clerks, one of the best functioning, dare I say, municipalities in the province. But it's for perhaps others to make that judgment. The deputy mayor's sneer, I'm just saying in regards to process. And as a result of implementing all but 3, as I understand, of the commissioner's recommendations. Anyway.
Well, I think perhaps because it's 5:35.
Talk about the judicial inquiry? Is that what you're asking me?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
I would say that there is some recognition of that in that you don't see it here. In your last strategic plan, and if you go back up to 27, Luke, you had act on the recommendations from the judicial inquiry. And when we said this 2024 to 2028 strategic plan is an evolution, you're seeing it. You've acted on those. It can come out of the plan. Doesn't mean that there's not always work to do on, as Councillor Doherty said, fostering a healthy democracy, building public trust, and supporting accountability. But I think you have come a long way. So if I can just move, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I just wanted to say how I read, and I could be wrong, but the facts, we had a large number, in my view, who thought that we hadn't managed the finances properly. I think it ties hand in hand with the fact we had such high interest in our water plant expansion. And I think it's well known in the community that when the bids came in, it was 150 million more and than we had planned for with our partnering municipality. And it was well followed in the local press and I think talked in the community. We had to extend our bid several times and we accepted it. And now we're waiting for the province who's indicated we can expect some funding. So I'm not sure that that generally our community's worried we're not managing things properly from our financial perspective, but that they're so hyper aware of we couldn't close the gap on 150 million that it maybe colored things a bit. Because certainly we do have very effective financial management and we're in excellent shape from that perspective, as we hear our auditors tell us every year. So anyway, I just wanted to add that lens to it. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And it partially their responses may be also a reflection of some of their own affordability challenges, right? They're answering about the town, but it may also be because they're feeling the pinch. So I want to take, and I'm cognizant of the time, but I want to back out, zoom out again. We've talked about a lot of different elements, right? From the natural environment, built form, community safety, but let's go back to those kind of core foundational elements of the strategic plan, which are the vision, mission, and values. And as a quick reminder, the vision is aspirational. The vision is about what you want to be, what direction you want to go in. I would caution against a vision that is a long list of adjectives, because then maybe you haven't really sorted out what you want to be. You're instead just kind of throwing up everything in the kitchen sink. And maybe it actually takes some effort to really think about what are the core words that we would use to describe what we want to be in the future. Again, this isn't something we're going to do at 5:30 on a Thursday evening. We're not going to nail this tonight. But what we're looking at are getting some of your ideas as to what you think is a core element of the vision. Mission statements typically reflect what you do. It's a day-to-day guide. They tend to be more staff focused. You could view them as starting with every day we provide the services and programs and services of the municipality. It's not intended necessarily to be aspirational. It's about what you're there to do. The last thing is about values. And I mentioned at the outset, but those are the principles by which you hold yourselves as you go about conducting the business of the municipality here on council, for town staff. And you could also view these as community values, as the community engages with each other, engages with their government. But first, I'll take you back to the vision that you have. And this is from 2020 to 2023. It's quite lengthy. I think it speaks to a lot of Collingwood's strengths. There's also some of what we might consider a mission statement in here. We did receive some feedback that while a lot of elements of it resonate, there's a sense that maybe it's a bit too long and that it's maybe not aspirational or future focused enough. So the question we would ask is, does this still resonate with you? Does it feel authentic to Collingwood? Because this is really where you have the chance to make this plan feel like Collingwood. And then are we missing things here? I can't see what you would be missing from a 2-paragraph vision statement. I could be wrong, but you might be missing something. That's not to say this is a fantastic statement. Do you think it is where you are now and where you want to go? Any thoughts here? I know it's long. Yeah, Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Okay, you said it's long. On the other day when this come up, I specifically didn't comment because I thought it was better to hear from the people that we had participating that weren't on council. But I do believe it's too long. I think it needs to be obviously shorter, and I think it needs to drive a little bit harder. But I've been toying around with how I would write it if I was writing it, that to give a sense, but I haven't come up with anything. Yeah.
Again,
I
that's
just
what we're here to do.
there's some duplication and such. I think we're somewhere else in this next 4 years. That's all. I think there's many elements that stay with it, but.
Can I push you a little bit further on, you just said, I think we're somewhere else. Where is that somewhere to you? What does that look like? Like, what are the words that come to mind? It doesn't have to be a perfect statement, just some of the words. And actually, this is a question for all of you.
I think it needs to talk about prosperity. I think it needs when we're talking about a vision, I think we need to be looking to that type of thing. And lifestyle experiences is and as I say, there's words in here that do that. But I was also trying to kind of figure out how to sustainability's in here. You'd want those types of words, but I just think the 2-paragraph thing is just too much.
All important, maybe as a context setting, because a lot of it is what you are today, right? And what's great about Collingwood. Other ideas? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Perry.
Thank you. I'm just reading it now, and I know it seems to me that focus is on boating facilities. Well, we have so much more than that. I know that seems, okay, if you're going to come to Collingwood, you have to be boating. But it's, I think that's very kind of one-dimensional, I would say.
Well, and kind of risky, because if you mention boating, but you're not mentioning, I mean, you do mention arts and culture, but there's a whole lot of facilities or activities that you're actually not mentioning. And
Yeah,
this is where people need to see themselves. Your community, you folks need to see yourself, your staff. Like this is the piece that's for everyone. So you don't want it to be too specific that only a certain part of your population can see it. Other ideas? Councillor Jeffrey?
Well, thanks, Stacey. I guess the one thought that just came to my mind, and I thought it was really interesting, it was a great point in terms of the experience of living in Collingwood isn't the same for everyone. And I think that part of our vision would be that while we don't all participate in the same things, that those opportunities are equal and inclusive. So, but I really liked the point that was brought up in the narrative, and I couldn't find it again after I'd read it once, but.
Councillor Bates. Yeah, I saw you. Go ahead.
All right, from the first paragraph, if you boiled it down, or if I boiled it down to what I would really want, it's an inclusive, generational, artful community with strong civic pride. Everything else, to a certain extent, is, in my opinion, not necessarily to point add-on, whereas that one, I think, is what I take away from it particularly.
Bringing up an organization that developed for a number of years. Part of the strategic planning that they went through more than once. And their vision statement is a minor option. And their vision was simply be the leader and be short.
Yep. I worked with Dufferin County last year, and we did a couple of workshops just like this, and we landed from a bunch of different options to a community that grows together. There's a lot, and it doesn't have to be, you've got summer, winter playground. It doesn't have to be your new logo, but I think you want something that you can carry in your pocket, and that if you were to distill those core things, as you just did, Councillor Baines, right? You took the most important words. What do we want to be? Comments? Here, Madam Mayor.
I liked the healthy lifestyle phrase, and because we have what they generally called active retirees moving here, but also families for the outdoors, the activities that are offered, and also the lifestyle that someone can have by, working so close to where they live and all what's available here. So I like that. I like the strong civic pride. And I like the fact that I believe our community, is always looking ahead. That I use words under the business or economic development part about 21st century,
Future focused.
businesses or focus or hub, or because I do think we do have a community that thinks a lot and wants our community the best it can be as we move forward. Thanks.
Also, this is the place where your staff can see it, and that gives them the direction to be, actually, we need to be ahead of the game. We need to be preparing for EI. We need to be preparing for all of what's coming down the pipeline. So you've got a future focused community, but you've also got staff who've, are thinking ahead too. Any other comments here? And again, I know it's kind of a long statement to read in person, but if you have other feedback, do share it with us. If there are words, especially, or ideas or concepts, please do share those with us. It doesn't have to be tonight. But why don't we move to the mission statement? And I want to talk just to show you Collingwood does not have a mission statement currently, nor does it have a set of values. A mission statement is really that core purpose. What are we here to do? And one of the things we were directed to consider as part of the strategic planning process was whether Collingwood should look at developing a mission as part of this. And we asked staff, and actually over 70% of staff said they'd like to see a mission. So I think it is something that there's an interest in, and it's not the aspirational vision for the future, but it is the place where staff can see themselves in this strategic plan. And ultimately, once you approve it, they're going to go away and implement your strategic direction, bring it back to you, as we've said. But it's important that they see their place here. And I provided some examples, and you can see I provided a range of them. Some of them we have crafted with council and staff. Some of them we haven't. But this is more food for thought, but I'd be interested as to whether or not council thinks that it's useful to have a mission here that really focuses on what you're here to do. Something as simple as even serving the public interest. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, I do. I would love to see a mission statement, but I'm looking at the 4 that you have as an example. And I think that, to me, the simplest one resonates the most with me. It's, it puts the citizens first. And I just think that's got more impact than all the other wordy ones. Do you like it too?
Don't worry. I have lots of ideas cooking up here. Others? Councillor Jeffrey, it looked like you wanted to jump in there.
Oh, that was Councillor Perry said it. I said me 3.
I don't know if this fits in, but I'll just leave you with, I really like the fact that so many of our staff are kind. And I don't know, I think that really serves our community well.
You have staff that care and they want to serve the community. That came out through our findings. And maybe something to think about when we talk about values, and we talked a lot about this at our steering committee meeting, that maybe caring is a value because it reflects how your staff care for the community, how you care for the community, and also how your community cares for each other. Think about. But any other comments on the mission? You're none. Sounds like there's interest for a mission. Simpler is better. Direct is better. Okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take all these ideas, talk to staff a little bit about them too, but we're gonna bring you back options to have a further discussion at our next meeting. So let's talk about values. I just kind of left some food for thought as I've been thinking a lot about this after our steering committee meeting. And values should inform everything you do. I'm sure many of you live by your own personal values, and these would be values for the town that would be upheld by members of council and staff, and they would guide everything you do. This would be the lens through which everyone in the room would approach their work every day, whether it's, you're cutting the grass, or you're a summer student teaching swim lessons to kids in the pool, or you're the mayor, the deputy mayor, members of council, or the CAO. These are for everyone. These purple boxes are just common values that we see in a lot of strategic plans, but doesn't mean, you wouldn't want 12 because then again, you're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. And you really want to think about what are the values that define us? What are the things that are most important when we think about how we're going to implement this strategic plan, how we're going to serve our residents, what speaks to us? Are there any here that jump out to folks? Or others? This is like my best of list, but it's not the only list. I think we've heard a lot about I'll keep talking in the absence of anyone, but diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've heard a lot throughout today about the importance of being a community for everyone, about equity, about inclusivity. That may be something to speak of or to include as a value, that's how you're going to approach your work moving forward. Not that you don't today, but to really enshrine it by putting them in a strategic plan. It's not just something that everyone kind of agrees to, off the top of that head, but you're enshrining it in the plan. You're accountable to the values.
Yeah, I think that is particularly more important. I was having a discussion with someone on the weekend who was commenting on the fact that we don't have a very diverse community right now, but that it started and it will be coming. And we should be having discussions about being prepared for that in our community so that we're more inclusive and welcoming. And so I think it's good to have that in there, and maybe more, because to me, those three words are used all the time now. They're like transparency or accountability. They sort of lose their meaning in some way. They're used so much. So anyway, I'll leave that with you. I think integrity is an important thing. We've had the misfortune in our community to see what happens when integrity isn't front of mind, whether it's staff or council. And so I think integrity and honesty is a huge thing for our community.
And some of these you could bucket them a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've supported strategic plans where council will align on the integrity value, but there's a value statement attached to it that speaks to transparency and accountability, because integrity is about having those things and being honest as well. So and I think too, what we'll do when we come back is really bring you not just words on a page, but a bit of a value statement for you to mull over. What does it mean? And I think that DEI, it's almost like a profession now. And, but I think what we're talking about is being an inclusive and welcoming organization and community. So maybe something a little different. Yeah, Councilor.
Why don't you consider words like approachable?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, approachable. Mm-hmm. Others? Yeah, Councilor Bain.
I would agree with Councillor Ring, particularly in regard to, as I believe the survey showed, 73% of the citizens come to customer service in person, which I think is the reality of approachable. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people here feel that they have good access to their local government, whether that's you as members of council, town staff, customer service. That's not everywhere. So again, you deserve a pat on the back for that. Anything else speak to anyone on the page here, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, I think leadership is important. I heard a lot, particularly as I was moving into, the position I'm in now, about wanting the mayor and the municipality to be leading and not bumbling along, if I can put it that way. But not that we were bumbling along, but anyway, I think leadership is important to the community. Yeah.
I think that's a great point, and something I've seen fairly recently. Speaking of the Dufferin County Strategic Plan, I believe one of their values that they aligned on was courage, for exactly that, a similar kind of sentiment that we are going to do the things that are required and we will do what it takes. May not always be popular, it may be difficult, there will be challenges ahead, but we are here to lead with courage. Passionate. Yes, Debbie. This is a nice place to put a lot of those overarching things that are incredibly important to you that don't fit as a goal necessarily, or as an initiative, or even as a pillar, but are absolutely critical to how the town moves forward. Because these are the things that are going to inform everything else. As you make decisions, you'll look at them from the lens of inclusivity. Are we leading the community? Are we ensuring that we're accessible? These are going to inform everything you do moving forward. They're not meant, yes.
I find this may go along with with caring and service excellence, and leadership would be commitment or committed, whatever one works. But
I'd really like to see that word courage up there, please. I like that word.
That's a good one. I think, back in the day, I'd say you'd see transparency, accountability, customer service, financial sustainability. Those would kind of be the core ones. I think we're evolving a little bit because now we've actually got some of that covered off in the strategic plan itself, right? If you've got a goal around financial management, you are showing a commitment there. And if you've got a pillar called transparent and accountable government, maybe you don't need to replicate that there necessarily. Oh, great. Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I am really glad that Councillor Jeffrey supported the addition of the word courage, because I really like that too. But the other thing that sort of speaks to me is the service excellence. And you have your sort of internal customer service, which is, how we as a corporation treat each other, work with each other, but we are in the service business for our community. So, it's all about excellence as aspiration.
Yeah, it's a very explicit reminder about what municipal government is here to do, which is to provide service, excellent service, if you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other? Yes, Councillor.
Just a comment or a question possibly to you. When you redo this and you come up with some of the suggestions, you're probably only going to pick about 4 of these values probably. Will they also include like a little one-liner comment after each one of them?
That's exactly what we're going to do. What we may do, we're going to take this back and think about it, is sometimes what we've done in the past is, and actually we can ask you now, we've sent out a survey to members of council, and often we include town staff, like the department heads as well, to provide some additional comments on the vision, mission, and values once they've had a chance to sit with it a little bit. We're asking you to make, they may look like boxes on a page, which I can move around very quickly, but this is important work that you can't get done in 30 minutes. And so, that is something we'll mull over as to whether or not council actually wants to sit with this a little bit and let us know, of 10, what are your top ones? Then we can build some consensus around the room, because we're not going to be able to satisfy everyone, but we do need to bring something back that we feel resonates with you as a collective. Would there be interest in something like that? Some additional follow-up on the vision, mission, values? I see nods, so we'll take that as a yes. And absolutely, we're going to come back with statements, because these words on a page leave too much, I think, to the imagination. They need some directionality and a real statement of commitment. So it'll probably be a we statement. So if we can just move to what our next steps are, as I know we've got some commitments in the room. We are going to take this back and really ponder and reflect on some of the feedback provided to us. We're going to revisit all of these pieces that we've talked about. And our next step is to work with some of the department heads to dig a bit deeper into what some of the actions could be to bring some of these goals to life. And as I've said, we're going to come back to you at a second workshop. Hopefully this one was enjoyable and you won't view it with a groan of dread, and we're going to work through this again, but this time you'll have more information before you to decide whether or not you think something should be a strategic priority, whether or not you want to commit to deciding in the future about whether to do something or not through the reporting process and through the budget. So we're still at the starting point, actually, of developing the strategic plan. We're going to have another session where there'll be a bit more meat to it so you can really decide, is this the direction we want to go? Is this the direction we want to give to our staff to implement? Is this the direction we want to send to our community in terms of the message that the strategic plan will send through the vision, mission, values, and strategic pillars and goals? So that's our next step. We look forward to seeing you all again. And we're so appreciative, I think, of your engagement. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Is it okay? We've done quite a bit in 3 hours. And as we reflect on a little bit, a follow-up email is okay to you in the short term? In the short term? Yeah.
We encourage it because, again, you've all been very patient sitting in this room in your beautiful town for 3 hours. We appreciate what an investment it is, but also as you go back out into the community, you're probably going to think of something that you wish you'd noted, or you're talking to a resident and you want to make sure that we know that. So we're happy to do that at any point. It's the beauty of email.
Okay, well, thank you so much for leading the workshop today. It was very informative and certainly got us thinking. Thank you for that. And we'll just finish looking for a motion to adjourn. Which Councillor Jeffrey has made. All those in favor? That looks to be quite unanimous. Thank you so much, everyone.